Assalamualaikum and a good day to everyone. Today we meet again in nutritional status assessment advanced level for Masters of Public Health Nutrition. So how are you guys? So it has been a week since we last met. Um, is there any questions from the previous lecture? So I've seen your feedback on the previous lecture. So I don't see any important questions. The one that you have asked, I've responded in UKM Folio. So is there anything else you want to discuss before we move on to the new topic today? Okay, no. So today's topic will be talking about measurement errors of dietary assessment. So last week we have explored various methods of dietary assessment. So allow me to share the slides. So we are going to talk about measurement errors in dietary assessment. So last week we have seen there are many ways of or methods of dietary assessment, but then each of them have the errors that comes with it. So we have also explored about the advantages and disadvantages of dietary assessment. So we are going to specifically look at the measurement errors. So these are the topic learning outcomes for today's session. So at the end of this session, students should be able to identify measurement errors in dietary assessment and then relate the measurement errors to different methods of dietary assessment that we have explored. So these are the 6 measurement errors in dietary assessment. So there are 6 types of error. The first one is respondent or interviewer biases. Second one will be respondent memory lapses. Third one, incorrect estimation of portion size, flat slope syndrome, omission of information, and finally, coding and computing errors. So let's look at the first error, respondent and interviewer biases. So respondent biases may be caused by incorrect question by the interviewer, incorrect recording of response by the interviewer, intentional omission by the respondent. So sometimes you ask questions, but then they are reluctant to answer. So there'll be intentional omission by the respondent biases and biases associated with interview setting, whether you are doing the interview at home, at the clinic setting, in front of other people. You also have distraction during the dietary assessment interview, confidentiality and anonymity of the respondent, and degree of rapport between the interviewer and respondent. So interviewer biases may also be caused by different interviewers probe information to varying degrees. This is especially in research project where you have different people interviewing different subjects. And the second one is intentionally omit certain questions because the interviewer feels that it's not right to ask or it's not comfortable to ask the question to them. And the third one is record response correctly. So recording is also one of the source or cause of the biases. So how do we assess biases? We compare intake calculated from multiple interviews on the same subject during the same 24 hours eating period using different trained interviewers. This is just to assess whether there is bias. It's like a quality control in the dietary assessment method. So over-reported or good food, vegetables, fruits by underweight person, this is a red flag. And also under-reporting of bad foods, snacks, use of tobacco, alcohol by overweight person. So to minimize biases, interviewer should be trained to anticipate and recognize potential sources of distortion and biases. So class, which method do you think that respondent and interviewer biases might arise from? You can comment on the chat box. Okay, good. So mostly answered that those which involves interview, like food frequency questionnaire, 24-hour diary calls, um, diet history questionnaires. These are some of the methods that involve interviews. Moving on to respondent memory lapses. So if you can see the figure here, it shows an elderly man looking at his foods. So most probably this elderly man will have problems in memory, dementia, Alzheimer, things like that. So respondent memory lapses may result in unintentional omission or addition of foods in recall memory. So this is not intentional. So these can be reduced by probing questions and or by using memory aids. So we can show pictures, we can show food models, we can have probing questions to avoid memory lapses. We also can check on recall ability before we conduct the dietary assessment method by obtaining duplicate recalls collected independently by two trained interviewers for the same 24-hour period. So foods contributing to the main part of the meal is remembered better than the condiments. So this is true even for us. So we tend to remember the main lao in our dishes rather than all the side dishes. So incorrect estimation of portion size is also a source of measurement error. In fact, it's the largest source of measurement error. So this occurs when respondents fails to quantify accurately the amount of food consumed. And how to minimize this kind of error is to use food models and also food photographs. So nowadays we have a lot of digital dietary assessment method using different apps and softwares. So these are the samples of softwares that's available out there, but not in Malaysia. So the first figure here shows a software that assesses dietary intake according to a range of food images. The blue color image here shows different types of images shown to the respondent for them to choose which represents their intake. The next picture shows food models. So it really looks like a real food and compared with standard size here. So now we go into an interesting syndrome, which is the flat slope syndrome. So a flat slope syndrome is a bias that may be introduced in recall methods by the tendency to overestimate low intake and underestimate high intakes. So flat slope syndrome is basically influenced by social desirability. So sometimes a person who are underweight reports that they took a lot of foods in a day, but then in fact, they only took a small amount of portion of the foods. Meanwhile, for person who are overweight, they underestimate their high intakes. They think that they are consuming a very small portion. In fact, they have taken a lot compared to what they reported. Next is omission of information on nutrient supplement usage. So nutrient supplements contribute to daily calories and also nutrient intake. So failure to collect data on nutrient supplements will result in a systematic underestimate of intakes of certain nutrients. So the data that usually we need to collect for nutrient supplement usage is the type of the supplement, the amount of the supplement, and also the frequency, so that we can calculate the real intake of the nutrients. And finally, the coding and computing errors So coding and computing errors arise when portion size estimates are converted from household measure to gram, or when food items are incorrectly coded. Remember, when we ask the respondents to report their portion size intake, they will usually report in household measures. Let's say satu cawan, satu sendok, satu pinggan, and so on. So it's the job of the interviewer to actually convert these household measures into gram of intake. So the interviewer needs to know what is equal to satu cawan, satu pinggan, satu sendok, and so on. So some of the errors might happen during the conversion, where the satu pinggan reported by the by the respondents might not actually want a normal plate, and it might be interpreted differently by the interviewer when doing the coding. So the computerized nutrient database also has its own limitations, such as not all nutrients or foods covered thus provide inaccurate data. So when a person reports that they have taken kueh kochi in their daily intake, and then we try to search kueh kochi in our nutrient database, and unfortunately we couldn't find one. So here it introduced error when we substitute kueh kochi with another type of traditional kueh of similar composition. So this table summarizes the sources of error with the important dietary assessment method. We have 24-hour diet recall, diet history, estimated record, and weightful record. And we can also see for different types of method have different sources of error. Example here is for dietary history. The sources of error with the plus sign is omitting foods, adding foods, estimating food weights, estimating frequency, and also coding error. Whereas day-to-day variation and changes in diet is unlikely to happen in dietary history. So this table actually is very useful in determining which type of dietary assessment method is suited for your condition of the interviewer and also the respondents. So to recap, there are 6 types of measurement errors in dietary assessment. First one is respondent or interviewer biases, respondent memory lapses, incorrect estimation of portion size, flat slope syndrome, omission of information, coding and computing errors. We also must take note that different dietary methods have different sources of error, and it is the job of the researcher or the nutritionist to evaluate the possible errors before selecting a dietary assessment method. So that's the end of our session today. Our next session will be discussing about the exact types of dietary methods and the sources of error. And the discussion will happen in groups. So please read chapter number 5 on measurement errors of our textbook and come prepared for the next session. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum and have a good day.